Hello, everyone, and welcome to the global launch of Making the Invisible Visible, Informal Innovation in South Africa. My name is Gina Lucarelli. I'm the team leader of the UNDP Accelerator Lab Network. We are launching this report today as the last day of what's called the High-Level Political Forum. That is the main body for review and follow-up for Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030, as many of you know, are the sets of promises that governments and all partners have made to achieve by 2030. So eliminating extreme poverty, for example, reducing inequalities between countries, taking action against climate change, among others. So the clock is very much ticking on this agenda, and governments are gathered today in New York to check in on the progress, particularly post the COVID pandemic, which took a toll on a lot of the progress on environmental agendas, on health, on gender equity across the board. So it's a check-in moment for all governments to see how they're doing on their promises before 2030. So this is why we're launching this work today, and we're really, really glad you all can join us. We're really thrilled to be here with our partners from the School of Economics at Utrecht University, the College of Business and Economics at Johannesburg University, and the Sloan School of Management at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So what we'll do here today is hear from the lead author on the results of this research, which is the first research conducted in Africa using comparable methods with other countries in a statistically relevant sample. So this is kind of what distinguishes this work, is that we're really keen to be broadening the base of our understanding of informal innovation, a topic which is not known enough about anywhere, but known certainly not enough about in the global South. So great to see colleagues here joining from Afra Labs and from Australia, from the ACT government in Australia. Fantastic. We've got a pretty wide reach here. Wonderful to have you all with us. So just a bit about the United Nations Development Program Accelerator Labs. Many of our colleagues are joining us here from multiple countries. I just saw Pasma from Sudan, among others. Essentially, we are building the world's largest learning network on sustainable development challenges. So we are a network of 91 social innovation labs embedded inside the United Nations. We cover 115 countries, and our basic mission is to reimagine development for the 21st century. We do this as a joint venture with the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, with the Qatar Fund for Development, and with UNDP partners at CORE, who are the governments who support the United Nations Development Program with regular resources. So really thrilled to be here with you all today. Thank you so much for joining us. At the UNDP Accelerator Labs, we are, as I said, trying to reimagine development for the 21st century. What that means is we are trying to embed experimentation in global development work. We're trying to explore alternative futures and undertake data innovations. And the focus of today, we try and learn from the women and men who are living in poverty, facing the effects of climate change, their inventions, their thoughts, their practices, and their inventions. So today we're focusing on that function of our global network of social innovation labs across the United Nations. And we're taking a deep dive into some work that we've done in South Africa, which we hope will shed light on this phenomena of informal innovation. We'll hear more in a moment from our researchers on what exactly that means, but at a high level, informal innovation, otherwise known as household innovation, means innovation that is done by people to solve problems basically outside of kind of the confines of, let's say, a research and development unit or a laboratory. These are just people solving problems and inventing on their own. So that's the focus for us today. So let me just share a couple of words on why this research is significant, and then I will hand over to our lead author, Jeroen de Jong from Utrecht University. So first, we wanted to conduct this research because very little is known about this type of innovation. Most of the research on innovation, most of what is known in terms of the innovation that happens inside formal institutions. And so here we're broadening out to say, what are the informal innovations that are out there? What drives it? Who's innovating? Why are they innovating? Are those innovations spreading? Are they selling innovations? How is this working? Because we see at a global level, when it comes to kind of creating a fairer and safer and greener world, there's a massive untapped asset. And that untapped asset is what 8 billion people know. So largely this work is about correcting the gap in what we know about innovation and building on bottom-up, user-led household innovation, Jugad referred to in various contexts, et cetera. Secondly, we want to really understand what how this innovation differs in South Africa and how it pairs with what we know globally from other countries. And thirdly, we want to make a contribution on a policy level to Pan-African investments that focus on African ingenuity and allowing that to drive Africa's development rather than expertise from the outside or inspiration from Silicon Valley. So the intention here is really to broaden our understanding, to learn to see different kinds of innovation and to see it everywhere and anywhere. So with that, let me hand over to our lead author of the research. We will run through the basic findings of what we have, and we do invite you, of course, to read the full report, which is available online. So handing over to Jeroen de Jong, who is the Professor of Marketing and Business Development, Chair of the Section Entrepreneurship at Utrecht University School of Economics. Jeroen, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much for joining. I hope you can hear me properly. I've been asked to sit up straight so that you can actually see my chin, because at the bottom of the screen it has my name tag. So if I dive like this, you won't be able to see me. But I guess the main message is the slides I can show you in a minute. It's a high-end summary of the report we've written about informal innovation and entrepreneurship in South Africa. So let me see, I'm working with this remotely, so the slides may show some hiccups, but we had three purposes with this research. So first and foremost, we wanted to map how many South Africans actually engage in informal innovation. So I'll first explain very briefly what informal innovation is about and what we found in South Africa. Second purpose of the project was to actually identify how many South Africans engage in informal businesses, because we find this is heavily related. Third, this is all embedded in a broader ecosystem and it has policy implications. So I'll spend some words on that as well. So, informal innovation, as Gina Lucarelli already explained nicely, these are the kinds of innovations that are not developed in the business sector. They're not business related in any way. So sometimes people at home might still work on innovations on behalf of their employer. That's what we exclude here. It's really about households, how people solve problems in their everyday lives, or just tinker around developing new products for themselves. From this activity, new businesses might emerge. So the current slide just shows some random examples we encountered in South Africa. A chicken feather remover or a plucker, a device that we recorded in a township, a fuse holder for automotive fuses, a pot drainer, enabling you to recycle the waste of your coffee machine, and shoulder bags that are made from former jeans, basically. So again, it's not about business innovation. In businesses, the classical motive is really primarily commercial. So householders typically have different motives. They innovate because they need applications for themselves, or, and it's usually a mix, they innovate for fun, to learn, to develop their personal skills or whatever. So you'll find household innovations in the literature under different terms. Like open source innovation heavily correlates with it. It's not entirely the same, but it's related, because open source innovations partially are also done by businesses nowadays. Makers and hackers and grassroots innovators are other terms you would find for basically the same phenomenon. And be aware, this is all embedded. It doesn't come like manna from heaven, but it's embedded in broader consumer behaviors related to do-it-yourself and tinkering. So why is this important? There is multiple reasons that we can find in the literature. So when householders innovate, a lot of times they come up with applications that are really new. So the products that emerge from this enable new functions. Because these functions don't exist, you see this often at the edge of new industries that emerge. If you look at many consumer products that are popular today, those were actually piloted first by householders and only commercialized later. So famous examples are kite surfing equipment, but yeah, there is a lot of examples here. So householders also can put pressure on the business sector. Their innovations are, or some of them are more radical. So if businesses adopt these innovations to commercialize them, it enables them to perform better, to actually achieve impressive growth rates. Sometimes householders also come up with alternatives for commercial products, putting price pressure onto commercial suppliers, which enhances a consumer surplus, or they might complement the offerings of commercial producers, which expands general use value. And then, yeah, especially for UNDP, householders also contribute to sustainable development goals. So a lot of their innovations, for example, enable better recycling, reducing domestic violence, etc. So in South Africa only, we find already 1 million people doing this, 2.5%. This has been investigated in a range of other countries. Some of them I mentioned here. First study was done in the United Kingdom. What we typically see is that in developed countries, the fraction of innovators is slightly higher, because part of this activity develops with people's personal incomes, especially when these innovations are developed for hedonic reasons like fun, enjoyment, and personal learning. But the percentages we find in South Africa, they can well match or even better compared to relatively advanced countries like South Korea and China. So South Africans innovate on a lot of objects. What's most striking here is that a lot of their innovations are actually children and education related, which we think resembles the demographic profile of the country, with many youngsters, many young growing families. So this is a bit different compared to first world countries. Just again, a random example I put to the slide is a model to help your children better understand mathematics. We find that actually a lot of South Africans invest in activities, products, and applications like these. So who is actually developing these household innovations? Again, the top bar here shows the percentage for all South African citizens. As you can see, it's usually associated with particular demographic groups. Youngsters do this relatively often, also because they may be deprived of resources. So they rather build their own versions of products from which new products can emerge. But better educated, people with higher incomes, and people in affluent areas usually develop this a bit more. We also find a relationship with business ownership. So if people are already established business owners, they're more likely to be innovators as well. The strongest difference we find for people running informal businesses. So those are businesses that are not registered, don't have bank accounts, etc. But yeah, we find this is really associated with entrepreneurial activity as well. So another result is that usually we find in most countries that people do this relatively on their own, or with very few helpers. So that's clearly not the case in South Africa. Actually, 1 out of 3 of the innovations we found in a survey was done with quite some others. It's much more a collaborative effort. Again, we think it's an implication of the demographic makeup of the country. Yeah, especially when you look at townships, it's much more a collaborative effort. And this also implies these innovations actually spread better to other people compared to other countries. And this is important because if people would solve a personal problem or find something that is of personal use value, usually it's also quite useful to others. So you would want, just from an economic and welfare perspective, that these innovations become broader available, if only to avoid that people would have to replicate the same innovative effort. So what we did in other country surveys is actually measure how these innovations spread. The most common pathway for diffusion is a direct sharing with peers. So maybe to your surprise, people generally share these innovations without claiming any intellectual property or without taking personal advantage. That is the most common one in other countries, but again, in South Africa, it's almost half of the innovations we found. This is quite common. A second pathway is that people might, on second thought, after catering a personal need or just innovating for fun, detect that other people need their innovation or could use it. So on second thought, they might see a commercial opportunity and commercialize the innovation themselves. In a venture, a startup, informal business, or could also be they build copies for their neighbors for pocket money. There's a huge variety here, but again, this happens more often in South Africa compared to other countries. The third pathway is contact a commercial producer, see if they're interested, want to somehow adopt the innovation and bring it to the market as a commercial product. And again, this happens more often. So with this slide, we delineate a bit more why people actually innovate. What are their motives and what are its implications for the diffusion? So based on a cluster analysis, we can identify 4 types of household innovators. The user type, that's about 20% of all. Their primary motive is necessity. Then there is a participator type. So their most outstanding motive is the enjoyment, learning, and skills that I mentioned. Helpers, they typically help others. So that could be a dad volunteering to build something with his kids. They could also use for school, helping out your neighbors, solving a particular problem, whatever. The vendor type is the most rare type. It's only 1 out of 7, but when I say only, this is relative, because in other countries, usually this fraction is much lower. So those are people who are on second thought interested in generating income with this. So if you look at the 3 pathways towards diffusion I just mentioned, we see some clear differences here as well. So obviously vendors, more often they start businesses or they contact existing businesses. Helpers, of course, they share a lot freely to peers. Maybe surprising, users, they don't have any incentive to share because they're primarily interested in solving a personal problem. But yeah, their innovation spread relatively well, especially compared to the second type. And again, what's most remarkable for South Africa is a relatively high fraction of vendors and helpers and good diffusion rates. So much for informal innovation. In the research, we also looked at informal businesses. What is South African people's engagement in informal businesses? Now, with the help of Erica Kramer, who is in our team, we developed a new measure based on 4 indicators that you see here on this slide. So if people say they have businesses and generate income with it, it might be well possible that they're not registered, don't have bank accounts, don't pay taxes, and don't keep their financial records. So that's clearly a fully informal business. They might be completely formal or somewhere in between. Especially locals can well imagine what this means in practice. So Example of an informal business is a cooking stand next to the taxi rank, where the guy Noel sells cow head meat. No need for him to have a bank account. His business is unwritten. He makes a decent income with this, but it's a full-fledged informal business. At the other side of the spectrum, we also interviewed animation studios with over 100 employees. Yeah, those are fully formalized businesses. Interestingly, and I guess not surprisingly, yeah, we find all three types, so informal, in between, and formal, to be broadly present in South Africa. So in our survey, it was actually around 17%, which represents 7 million South Africans in the age group 18 and over, to have to run some kind of business. And when we say some kind of business, it actually generated income for them. So it was not a wannabe business or a nascent business. If we compare this with the official statistics, like the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, we sense that actually a lot of this informal activity is not recorded. So if you break down informal business ownership across demographics, again, some interesting patterns emerge. If you just look at the gray bars in this picture, that's the kind of percentages you could expect if you would only consider formal businesses. The green ones come into place. That's the fully informal businesses. Now, what we, for example, see is that females are much more likely to have informal businesses, while there is a gender gap if you would only consider the formal ones, but it almost vanishes if you include in-between and informal businesses. Same for people with university degrees, or look at the townships versus affluent areas, so barely formalized businesses and a lot of informal activity going on. Again, we find a strong correlation here with informal innovation. So we sense that informal innovations actually seem to help drive the informal business emergence. And the other way around, if people are already business owners, regardless if it's formal or informal, are more likely to innovate and sometimes also freely share. So this is policy implications. There will be a report published and sent over to you after the meeting, where you can read all about this. But all this activity doesn't happen in a vacuum. So in any economy, there is facilitators and institutions that influence this. So I'm not going to discuss this slide in detail, but I do want to reveal it has policy implications. And in the report, we take a first step at mentioning examples. I can say that the policies that we can propose, they clearly deviate from the policies you would get in if you would only consider formal innovation in the business sector and formalized businesses. So this is much more down to earth. It should be policies that deal with the everyday problems that householders actually deal with. Two important ones is lack of incentives. So especially when people are primarily user or participation oriented, they do not necessarily have incentives to spread their innovations. So you could develop policies for that purpose, but also barriers that people face. Those apply more to the commercial and helper type I mentioned. So I hope this raises your interest to read the report. And I just want to stop here and hand back to Gina.
Thank you so much, Jeroen. I think we've got some fascinating results here. First, the significance of the size and scope of informal innovation in South Africa, this distinction that you raised in terms of the collaboration levels in South Africa, and informal innovations in South Africa diffusing. I think it's a big deal that we see the likelihood as high for women to innovate as for men. So some really fascinating findings, and definitely worth, especially when you're looking at the informal economy, worth digging into the report to learn more about this. All of these are phenomena we know not enough about. So thank you so much for consolidating what is a very rich report into a brief headline level conversation here. What we're going to do now is delve into some of the hands-on innovations, the types of innovations that we would be talking about when we look at informal innovations. We're going to have two parallel sessions. One will focus on South Africa. So we'll be hearing in that session from Sifiwe Zuma, founder of Anathos Solutions, and Evan Jacobs, the head of solutions mapping in UNDP South Africa. So very much looking forward to that session. In the main room, we'll be having a conversation with Kenyan innovators. So we'll be hearing from Savio Wambugu, the founder of MT Kenya Hub, and Caroline Kiarie, the head of exploration in UNDP Kenya.
Thank you so much. That was really a good introduction to informal innovation, and I think great insights coming from South Africa. My name is Caroline Kiarie Kimondo, and I'm the head of exploration at the UNDP Accelerator Lab. I'm joined by my colleague, Savio Wambugu, who is the head of Mount Kenya Hub, which is in the central part of the country. And in this room, we shall be discussing the state of the innovation landscape and the innovation ecosystem and how it impacts on informal innovation in the country. So from a background perspective, the lab in UNDP Kenya conducted a mapping of the innovation ecosystem in 2022. And this was really just for the benefit of understanding the history of innovation development in the country, the supporting structures, whether from a policy, from an environmental perspective, but also wanted to understand what are the innovation assets, which are the labs, the hubs, the co-working stations. And this was really just to for us to see if an innovator is starting out from whatever point it is, what access do they have to supporting networks? Where can they plug in? Where do they start their journey of innovation? And so just before I begin, I just want to give you an example of innovations that we've seen, informal innovation, our household innovations that we've seen over the last 3 years that kind of point to why there was a need for such an ecosystem mapping. So in 2020, at the height of the pandemic, a young 9-year-old boy called Stephen Wambugu, he came up with a hand washing station. This is just made up of metal and wood, and this was just to facilitate the washing of the hands in his location where water was a scarcity, but also soap was also not too available. So this was just to enable his community and his family have access to cleaning facilities. And in the same time, 7 students from one of the local universities, Jomo Kenyatta University, they came up with a ventilator that operated on 12 voltage power, which could either be from electricity or from solar power. So we've seen a lot of innovators coming up within their community or their sphere, where they are not neither formalized or neither registered, but they meeting a certain need that is important at that time. So with the innovation ecosystem mapping, we did find out a number of insights that are relevant to this conversation. One of the insights was that a lot of the innovation assets, which are the hubs, the labs, and all those other structures that help an innovator in their journey, they are mostly in the urban centers. Up to 46% of these assets were in Nairobi alone. The rest were divided across other cities and other towns, but for most part, the rural areas did not have as much access to innovation assets as Nairobi and Mombasa and Kisumu, which are big cities. We also found out that for many of the innovators, they had started their journey in the last 3 years. So this is we started this study in 2022. So if you look back, for most of the innovators, they had started their journey in 2019. So they're fairly young in the sector, in the industry. And we also found out that for many of them, as much as 50%, they were under the age of 35. So the innovation space in Kenya is largely, populated by young people under the age of 35. We found that women were actually missing a lot in this narrative only 22% of the innovators we interviewed and interacted with were women. So this is a space that needs to really be gender inclusive, and we are also focusing on what ways we can have more women in this space. A lot of the innovators were doing this on their own, which is a comparison to South Africa, where we found that a lot of the innovators working together. So for us, we found that a lot of the innovators were sole proprietors or sole driven. Another finding we got to establish is that for the most part, the innovators in the country were mostly driven towards formalization. So up to 73% of the innovators we interviewed had registered their business. And there are a number of factors that contributed to this. One is the age. One is the education level. So up to 60% of the innovators had a background degree in a basic degree. Sorry about that. So for most part, they were very educated. Another thing that contributed to this is the source of funding. 60% of the innovators had to depend on funding from government and NGOs who set the requirements of their support, their grants to be registered. So all of these factors were some of the factors that drive formalization for the innovators in the country. But we also saw that there are many things that contribute to informality or drive informality in Kenya. One of the factors are the registration process. Many of the innovators we've talked to talk about the registration process being very, very cumbersome. If you're coming up with an idea, you'll have to either have one business permit or a number of business permits. So just that cumbersome process it deters innovators from formalizing. Another thing is the taxes. A lot of the innovators want to remain informal because of the high tax that they'll have to encounter, and fairly early on within their innovation journey, where they've not actually accessed the type of market that would make them sustainable. And for most part, like I shared earlier, they are depending on grants. So they're not also as business sustainable as other businesses would be. So they tend to want to remain informal. And another thing is the lack of support. So we found that many of these innovators do not have access to support structures, whether it is legal, whether it is intellectual property management. So many innovators come up with ideas and they don't know how to secure these innovations through intellectual property management. Only 40% had actually applied or considered applying for intellectual property. So this is also a difference when it comes to South Africa. A lot of them do not have access to industry, so they do not have access to how they can industrialize their products, especially when it comes to hardware solutions. We found that only 19% of the innovators that we engaged were working on hardware solutions. The rest were mostly either a combination of tech or solely software-based innovations. We also found that for many innovators, they don't have access to research and development. So when you're coming up with an idea that is going to be used for domestic use, for example, a product for cleaning or a product for consumption, whether it is innovations around food security, many of these innovators do not have access to the research and development that is necessary for them to either commercialize or either to get certification. So for most part, they then remain informal because these are requirements for them to be able to get into the formal market. So that's just a snapshot of what we have within the Kenyan innovation ecosystem. But I have with me Mr. Savio Wambogo, who is the founder of Mount Kenya Hub, and he'll be sharing with us a lot about the experiences of informal innovators. So over to you, Savio. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Carol. And I thank you for the kind of reports that you have given, which is also aligning in regards to what De Jong also elaborated. So for me today, my name is Savio Wambogo. Professionally, I'm a software engineer and the founder of Mount Kenya Hub. So before I share some kind of two shortlisted innovators in Kenya, who I want to mention that we identified in regards to a program that was supported by UNDP. I concur with you in regards to most of the report that you just shared. So as you can see, you can confirm if you can see my screen.
You can see.
Yeah, so what you can see is there are two different innovators located in Nyeri. So for those people who don't know Kenya, Nyeri is located around 150 kilometers out of the capital city, Nairobi. And I know some of the things that you might know is most of you know about Mount Kenya, which is the second largest mountain in Kenya. So Nyeri is located at the foot of Mount Kenya, which also means that it has the largest forest cover in Kenya, having around 30% of forest cover. So last year, during the program that I talked about, we were able to identify two different innovators. They are different. On the left, there is Ken, who is an individual innovator, but also on the right is Hassan. Hassan is an individual innovator, but he has formed a group. And this is even in regards to what Carol said and Jong, I came to understand that being informal, you can also run a business informally and as well make it sustainable, create jobs, and as well create impact. I'm going to give an example of these two entrepreneurs. So Ken on the left is an engineer. He has no degree whatsoever. He has no college degree. His core business, or mainly his in quotes official business, is mainly selling and producing avocado oil. So he's manufacturing. He has a whole manufacturing plant, but his core business is the avocado oil. But what made me shortlist him here is because apart from just having the official business, which is mainly the avocado oil, all the equipments that Ken uses, he manufactures and fabricates them by his own, in his own small area in the ghetto areas in Nyeri. So Ken, as you can see in the first photo, he has a steaming or a drying machine or drying panels that he has fabricated himself. So according to him, he doesn't see it as a business, but when you look at it keenly, and as much as he has been able to sell one or two different devices, you're able to see that this is an informal person who is running an informal business, fabricating this kind of machineries. The second machine on the second photo is mainly a machine that is able to press and produce the avocado oil that he uses. So when I asked him why he fabricated this, he told me, you know what, Savio, for me to get such a machine, and for example, in China, it will cost me around 12 to 20,000, $120 to $200,000. I do not have that kind of money. So for what I had to do is get this scrap metal from the street kids in Nyeri and then try to fabricate this machine. And the good news is, as we talk now, he has been able to sell these two machines informally, which he thought was just like a side hustle. On the right side, we have Hassan. Hassan, when he was setting up, he's also an entrepreneur in Nyeri, but Hassan runs a group which is called the Nyeri Youth, as stated there. So Hassan, their core business is mainly, they have created a group. This group does what we call table banking. So for those people who don't know about table banking, so table banking is basically a concept simply whereby a group comes together maybe once a week. They bring together money, they put the same money, or they basically contribute a certain amount of money, and then instead of depositing this kind of money, they loan one another using the same money. So what Hassan told me is, Savio, this is not sustainable. The group that we are in has 52 members as we speak, and over 32 are women, so which was also encouraging. So what I thought is, Hassan is a Form 4 leaver or high school leaver in Kenya. So what he did is he talked to these ladies and told them that they can start doing recycling. So they do 3 different kind of recycling. So the first one is the organic kind of recycling. Organic, we talk about the food stuff. So they recycle food stuff, and then they use the same machines that they have fabricated themselves, as you can see on the right, and produce using the organic the organic materials. They are able to come up with charcoal briquettes through a process called carbonization. And they also have another kind of recycling, which is the inorganic waste. So where Nyeri is situated, there is one of the biggest bottlers company. It's basically around 10 kilometers from where they are. So there is a lot of glass, maybe from sodas, beer. So they collect this kind of glass, and then so they use the women to collect this kind of glass, and then they are able to recycle them and come up with things like building materials, or things like vases, artifacts, and such. And the last thing that they do is the household goods. So things like blankets, clothes, decorations. They're able to collect these and as well recycle them to make decals. So what you can get from this story is all these people have official jobs, but according to what they say, the informal side of business is what gives them money. It's what makes them sustainable. But for me, how I see it is, when I ask them, why are you not formal? Why are you not registering your business? They tell me, Savio. And I know the team here will also come and to tell us in regards to the same. They tell me, Savio, it's flexible. So we as Nyeri youth, tomorrow, we might want to come up and recycle something else. We do not need to go and look for a certification to do that. We don't need to ask somebody whether it's correct or right to do this. We just wake up one day and start recycling a new thing and coming up with new products. So, Caro, just like you said, we have a lot of informal businesses, but it's not that it is illegal. It is just that there are advantages that are linked in towards this kind of informal businesses. And I know we can talk, we can even look at how they interlink in terms of how does the informal sector and formal sector come to interlink. Like, for example, we know that Kenya is among the best in terms of mobile money. So most of these businesses, as much as they are informal, there's a way that they are linking towards the formal side. And by this, I mean like using the mobile payments, receiving money, and such kind of things. Yeah, thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Savio. We want to hand back the mic to Gina.
Thank you so much. Some fascinating results. And I think we have put the link to the study on the innovation ecosystem in Kenya in the chat, just to underline, how extraordinary it is that President Ruto launched that report. So there's a real focus on in Kenya on building up this kind of innovation, and we're very, very happy to see that and all that's going on. What we're going to do now is just hear very briefly from our colleagues from South Africa, given that we tried something a little fancier than maybe we should have, and weren't able to enable the breakout room with parallel discussions. So let me hand over to Evan Jacobs, Head of Solutions Mapping at UNDP South Africa.
Thank you very much, Gina. Am I audible?
You
Perfect.
are audible.
Thank you. And great. Thanks. And apologies again for the technical difficulties, everyone. Once again, my name is Evan Jacobs. I am the Head of Solutions Mapping within the Accelerator Lab in South Africa. Just to build off a little bit quickly on what Gina mentioned around the purpose of the Accelerator Lab, in addition to it being the world's largest learning network around development, it's really founded on the principle that the people who face challenges on a daily basis know them best, right? And if these people who face these challenges every day come up with those solutions are necessarily grounded in the realities that they face, and they're more often effective because they need to be. And so that's kind of the parallel between the report that we've that has been presented to you today, and the importance of surfacing informal innovations. Very briefly, South Africa has a fairly robust innovation ecosystem, which operates at various levels, at the public, private, education, and third sector spheres. At a national level, the Department of Science and Innovation seeks to boost socio-economic development. The Technology Innovation Agency seeks to bridge the gap between higher education institutions and innovators on the ground. But despite this robustness, there are still operators who aren't necessarily within that ecosystem. And in this case, it's those informal innovators. And I think before I hand over to Siphiwe, one of the most important things about why it's important to surface these informal innovations is, until we see the solutions from everybody, we cannot fully understand the developmental challenges. And this will become apparent in Siphiwe's innovation and why he needed to create the solution to this unmet need. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Siphiwe Zuma, who has developed an ingenious backpack umbrella, which is a retractable umbrella to be attached to wheelchairs to provide the disabled protection from rain and harsh sunlight, etc. Siphiwe, I'll hand over to you. If you could just give a brief reason about why you needed to create what you created, and also maybe a little bit about yourself and your motivations behind your innovation. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. No, it is really, really appreciated. My name is Siphiwe Zuma. I was born and raised in Durban. So basically, how my story starts: when I was 9 years old, I was unfortunate to be in an accident where I was cut short. So then that sort of changed my life, so to speak. But challenges were not met immediately. But soon as I started tertiary, that is when I started facing serious inconveniences because of the fact that I was using crutches. So I was studying interior design. So when one is doing interior design, you have to carry, your laptops, your boards, and so on. And given the situation, I was using crutches. So it became a serious inconvenience when basic things like rain, when it was raining. So I was facing challenges when it is raining. So now the question to me was that, having fought so hard to go to just a tertiary institution, am I going to let this inconvenience stop me or deter me from pursuing my higher education? So fortunately, I did not give up. I used the softwares that we are using in interior design to sort of design a makeshift solution for myself so that I won't be stopped from attending. So basically what happened was I looked at myself saying, okay, what is it that I use with me each and every day that I can sort of use to help me attend campus without inconveniences? Then I designed myself a backpack that has a retractable arm that is going to hold the umbrella for me whilst I'm moving and attending campuses or doing any errands, and then it will retract back and sort of store the umbrella when I do not need it. I think it is worth noting that I wasn't doing that for entrepreneurial reasons, but it was merely solving a solution for myself. So given that I was a student, having no funding and do not know what to do after that, I sort of looked into posters to find funding sort of to develop this solution for me, but not to venture into business or so on. Then it was only after then where I was actually told that there's actually a lot of people who are suffering with the same problem. Why don't you just turn your story into a solution for the many people your age or your many peers? So then that's when we started doing what we're doing. Then I came across an agency called TIA in South Africa. They sort of helped me with everything. As I said, I wasn't, entrepreneurial versed. So they sort of helped me to register a company, blah, 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 and also, and all the rest. Then we moved from there to designing the first prototype, second prototype, third prototype, and then from there, we currently now have a minimum viable product, which basically the first prototype is a umbrella that is attached on a backpack. And then the last, which is also a minimum viable product, it's a arm that is carefully designed to fit in a commonly used wheelchair that also serves as an arm for those who are self-propelling with wheelchairs. The main vision and the primary reason for that is to, improve equality for people with physical challenges, to not feel inferior and dependent if they want to, engage on their private errands or attend classes and all the rest. So basically, that is how we came about with the project Untapped Solutions. So basically, currently, right now, what we are doing, we are testing out the minimum viable product with sort of like huge players in the wheelchair sector in South Africa, in Durban, largely, and we are getting feedback from the users and from those who are actually selling the products, which is constructive, and hopefully with more funding that we will get, we will be able to actually rectify, go back to the drawing board, and then from there, go to commercialization. Really, the aim is not profitability, but being the person who's in the shoes of what we are faced with, is to see my peers and colleagues being able to attend their errands, attend classes without inconveniences. I have stories where I had some people that I was staying in the same res with, who, after they knew that I was working on such a project, Musa came to me, was actually using wheelchair. He came to me and he was crying. He was soaked wet after attending a class, and he said, "How far are you with your project? Because had you been done by now, I was going to be using it, because they said to me, I cannot use a shuttle because it is only me, it's going to be waste. And so I feel left out and inconvenience." And it is stories like that that actually validated the projects that we were working on. We do not go with the formal approach of things. It was basically inspired by problem solving. I have another guy who's called Musa, who
I'm so sorry,
was in an
Sifiwe.
accident.
Sifiwe, it breaks my heart to interrupt you because I'm so interested in what you're saying. I'm so sorry. We're just trying to make up for time, given we had these technical difficulties. We had hoped to have parallel discussions.
No problem.
So I do want to just give a chance to our colleagues from University of Johannesburg and from Massachusetts Institute of Technology to comment on this phenomenon in the global scale, so we can close out this session for today. But I do want to thank you, and I think what we can do is we'll see about organizing a follow-up session, since we weren't able to hear the full story. I think what you're talking about is really, really extraordinary. As Evan said, this is a situation where we're seeing the solution you've made and learning more about the problem, right? Understanding that shuttles don't work when it's only one person. This is really, really critical. And also learning from you how you are solving problems and trying to diffuse the innovation, not necessarily to commercialize it. But of course, that's one avenue of diffusion. So thank you so much. And I do apologize again for the interruption. I just want to get us out of here on time and get a bit of a broader reflection. We'll zoom out now. Let me hand over to our dear colleagues. So we work very closely with Dr. Erica Kramer-Mbula, who's a professor of economics, research chair in transformative innovation at the University of Johannesburg, who were also part of the research work. Given we're tight on time, Erica, I'm just going to give you the floor to say whatever you want to say. So wide open on your side to comment on the research, on the, Sifiwe and his colleagues' innovations, wide open here as to on the informal economy, on informal innovation. Over to you for some commentary. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. And yes, it's a pity that we couldn't hear the full story from Sipiwe. There were some resources that were shared in the chat, and I hope people can follow up the story more fully. Listening to his story, I think it gives us a very good understanding of the importance of recognizing and supporting informal innovators and acknowledging the contribution to society. My main takeaways from his particular case that I would like to share and that are related to the results of the study is really highlighting perhaps 4 or 5 things. One, that informal innovation is demand-driven and community-driven. His innovation comes from a deep understanding not only of his everyday need, but also served the needs of a much wider community. That has to be recognized. The importance and the resourcefulness and the resilience in the face of challenges and constraints. I think how this overcoming obstacles should be and finding creative solutions to these problems should be very much acknowledged. The impact, the societal impact, his journey really demonstrates the potential for meaningful and sustainable impact, not only in the communities, but potentially more broadly. And this potential for impact needs to be seen and valued and measured and captured to be able to drive the social and economic change that it can drive. It's very important to take a systems approach and build collaborative networks within the system. For these informal innovators to achieve the full potential, they need to connect with a whole constellation of actors and organizations that can facilitate full dissemination. This includes other entrepreneurs, NGOs, investors, universities, and so on. So such connections need to be built, nurtured, and supported from a policy perspective as well. And finally, Sipiwe's story is a story that needs to be showcased and captured to be an inspiring example to young individuals in similar communities and with perhaps other range of related but similar perhaps needs, demonstrating that innovation and entrepreneurship can be an accessible path despite the challenges. And just in the last minute, if I might add, I would like to highlight how important it is to capture the story of informal innovation in the context of Africa. Is not only important for the case of South Africa and for Africa more broadly, but also globally. We see in the study, but also in the innovations that have been presented, that informal innovations adhere to principles that connect with a circular economy, with a care economy. We see the huge potential for economic impact, employability, social mobility, and how important it is in South Africa and how relevant it is in South Africa compared to other countries such as South Korea and China, and that the dissemination is larger than in other countries. It represents a huge untapped potential, and how do we direct resources to this potential is the key question, and how do we mobilize the innovation system around it to make sure that that potential is realized. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Absolutely, fully agree. I think we've we can learn a lot from South Africa on breaking the diffusion barrier, which we know is the final frontier when it comes to innovations. So we're very excited, for all of us to learn from that. Thank you so much, Erica, and thank you always for your support to our work at the United Nations Development Program on learning on informal sectors. We work very closely with you, of course, in our partnership on pathways to formality with the International Labour Organization, where we try and do some research and development on our approach to informality, not always assuming that formalizing is the solution. Let me hand over now to Dr. Eric van Hippel, the T. Wilson Professor of Innovation Management at the MIT Sloan School of Management. Eric works very closely with us and advises us, encourages us to keep building and learning to see these kinds of innovations. And we're always grateful for him, for his connections to research institutions, to private sector partners, to many organizations who are all trying to learn from this particular kind of innovation, and most importantly, how to support it. So over to you, Eric.
Okay, so 2 quick points. First, I'm just so honored to work with the Accelerator Lab. The Accelerator Lab, the whole team run by Gina, is an amazing innovation in itself, because it is systematically exploring what is a huge fraction of important innovation in the world. So, I mean, this one report that we have here today from South Africa is amazing and well done, but also just huge praise to the entire team for spreading out across the globe and studying sort of this really important phenomenon. So that's number one. Number two, you see in the report that we focus on individual innovations, like a particular way of bringing a child to school or a particular kind of product. What I want to mention is that there is a larger phenomenon of which each innovation is a part. So basically what is happening here is small innovations, individually small, within a large structure that is evolving and is being driven by consumer innovation. For example, in Bangladesh, people are learning how to live when the flooding prevents ordinary farming and so on, as flooding increases over the years. So they don't just develop one innovation, and they do develop extraordinary ones like floating fields, but they develop interconnected innovations so that they can, in net, become an aquatic culture. So what we see here is extraordinarily important, both in terms of individual innovations that we've been studying, but also over time showing the large scale that is happening in the household sector. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to both of you for your flexibility. I do apologize again for the technical difficulties that made us be a train that needs to catch up on schedule. So huge thanks for that, Eric. And a very good reminder indeed that each of these innovations, though small, are embedded in systems of use for these innovations. Indeed, Eric also talked about collaborative networks. We talk about ecosystems that are not natural ecosystems, but that are innovation ecosystems. It's really critical to take that systems perspective. And I think if you dig into this report in the reading of it, which is the main call to action here as we close out this event today, it's indeed read the report, read it with a systems lens. Let us all continue to learn to see these kinds of innovations. If you're an academic institution and keen to do this kind of work, please do reach out to us because we are committed to making this work more visible. And as Eric said, studying it systematically so that we learn from it. If you're a non-government partner, please also reach out. We're keen to learn from it, to learn particularly about the dynamics in informal economies. And if you are a policymaker or someone advocating for policy change, please do pick up the mantle that Jeroen rightly put in place, which is that informal innovation needs grassroots policies, needs different kinds of policies to foster and encourage it. We can't just copy paste from Silicon Valley and hope the same thing occurs. So of course we need investments in education, at least electricity and connectivity, but fab labs and innovation hubs, as well as reducing the red tape in establishing and formalizing businesses. So many thanks to all of you for joining us today. I do suggest if we can, we will send you all a follow-up email here, which gives you the report and gives you the recording. And we'll see about organizing in due time a session so we can hear more from Sifiwe about his work. We'd very much like to delve into that and give it the proper space that it deserves. So huge thanks to all on the Accelerator Lab team behind and backstage for making this all happen. And enjoy the rest of your day, all of you. Thank you so much.